Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So continuing on from a previous Pursuit of the Truth when I was talking about the w.h.o making aspartame. I think it's used for diet products. It's a lesser sugar, isn't it? Like a saccharin, isn't it? That maybe it's possibly carcinogenic. So the w.h.o have released that. And what was interesting, and this is the case in point why I put this on the Pursuit of Truth, is to show how, everyone always talks about the independence of human beings. Well, of course, human beings cannot be independent because that's just the way we're wired. We have opinions and views. So, no two people are alike. That's why we have, polar opposites, when we have, one part of human beings that support this side of a story and another apply that. So there's no real true independence. That's a fallacy. You usually used to hide when you want to make a point or make a judgment, and you want to pretend that it's somehow independent when it's not. But why I wanted to put this is to show that how the media could tackle this story in two ways. And I'm sure there are other media outlets that may have shown it in this way, or possibly maybe more like a health channel on YouTube may have put it this way, which is that the w.h.o have done some studies and done some research. I assume it's credible. They are the w.h.o. We were trusting them when it came to COVID, weren't we? So now it's a bit ironic that now it's like, wow, it's only the w.h.o. It's only possibly, but. So they got this story, research. So the media could attack it in two ways. They could either say, well, this is, nonsense. It's not really that bad. Don't worry about it. And, carry on as usual. And if you get cancer, it's not because of this, because you have to have huge amounts of it. Of course, what you don't realise is that it's in lots of different products. So you may be having huge amounts of it because it's spread out. And there are other carcinogenics that you're eating all the time, so it may amount up to it. So it's not just about eating that one product, it's about eating carcinogenics in general, which, in this news article, they don't really put it like that. They're talking about just drinking, say, diet cola drink. If you drink like 200 cans, then you may have a problem. But the thing is, if you're eating other things that, maybe carcinogenics like red wine or red meat, or even aloe vera. I didn't even know that was one. Who knows what's on this list? Most of us probably don't know what's on this list, and so therefore you can't really do that unless you're actually studying. Which I suppose if it's your body and it's only your body you're going to get, we really should be, but we're not taught to do that. We're taught to trust. So they could have come with two stories, that way, sort of saying, or they could have attacked it and say, well, the w.h.o have said it's this, but look at the government. The government's, saying this is, it's only possibly, don't worry about it. And they're letting all these huge companies that are making millions of dollars and pounds and whatever currency, selling this thing that could be a possible cancer killer, kill you with cancer. It reminds me back in the days of tobacco. I remember when I was growing up, the debate about tobacco causing cancer, and, the government and the research and all that used to poo-poo it and say, no, it doesn't cause cancer. Everyone thought, yeah, I think it does cause cancer. And it took years, and we've all seen the Al Pacino film about that. And now we are at a stage where they put it on the packets. So maybe we're at that stage now with aspartame, 30 years ago, where it's only possibly, don't worry about it, carry on. And so they could have had, either way, this story could have gone. It's interesting, then you've got to think, well, why did they pick this way? Well, obviously because the government have said, this is, or maybe they even believe that the story they're telling is a fair representation of truth. They're trying to calm it down rather than, but most media outlets, they work on fear. We all know that with how we were given the daily deaths of COVID every single day, whereas other things that people die of more than, say, COVID, we're never given the daily figures of that. Unless, they want to try and stoke up that fear. So, it interested me the way that they've just gone about this and said, wow, it doesn't really matter. you know, ha ha ha, as long as you're not drinking 300 cans, then you'll be fine. But not making you remember that this list is quite long, and there may be loads of other carcinogens that you're taking every single day. And of course, the thing is, like, if you ask a person, like, what causes cancer, if you Google it, you won't find an answer. I mean, obviously, we know that tobacco causes some cancers, you know, to do with lungs and the vocal cords and things like that. And we know, I think, there's alcohol with the liver. But there's not, you know, lots of other cancers that we don't really know why people catch them. You know, we know it's to do with the DNA reprinting wrongly, but we don't know what is the catalyst, the cause. What could be all these carcinogens we're all eating that, you know, that possibly may be causing cancer. And of course, the reason why it's probably possibly, and they don't really go into this, is how difficult it is to probably prove what causes this. Because a human being ingests and takes and partakes in lots of things. So, it's not like an animal, a lab rat, where you can put it in a cage, you can grow it, and you can only give it this one thing. So you can sort of, say with certainty that it's this one thing that did it. You know, with human beings, we're out in the air, we're breathing things in, we're eating multiple different things. So to try and pinpoint that is very difficult, and that's probably why it's possibly. But the thing is, they didn't bother to interview someone from the WHO or the research team who did this to sort of put their point of view and say, well, no, what you're saying, what your scientist that you talk to is saying, journalist stroke scientist is saying, it doesn't actually make sense with the research that I've actually done, because I've done this and this is why it's like this. They never had that argument. And that also then questions, you've got a question, well, normally they have, why don't they have someone from the WHO defending their research? That would make sense, wouldn't it? That would be right to reply. Especially if you're going to come at it and say, well, you don't need to worry. Carry on drinking your diet drinks. Carry on drinking your aspartame and all your other things. And don't worry if you get cancer, because it wasn't because of that, was it? So I'm sounding like Russell Brand now. So let's hear these two stories for this.
And check-in staff from 4 different companies, and there are warnings that disruption, delays and cancellations are inevitable across the airport. So a warning to anyone who's planning a trip later this month to check that out. Now, the World Health Organization has formally ruled a common artificial sweetener used in diet soft drinks are a possible carcinogen, but it won't change its health guidance. Well, here's Sky's Thomas Moore with more.
It's called Aspartame, and if you go into any supermarket, you're going to see it in lots of low-calorie, low-sugar foods and drinks, ranging from Diet Coke to Wrigley's Extra Gum to Muller Light yogurts. I mean, it is there, so it's really important that we know that it's safe. And one World Health Organization body has now looked at it, and they categorize something like 1,000 substances so far into the likelihood that they cause cancer. And this is how they've arrived at the conclusion that aspartame may possibly cause cancer. That sounds alarming, but they rank things right at the top are the things that definitely cause cancer. Things like tobacco and alcohol. Followed that is ones that probably cause cancer. Things like red meat, and then you come down to the category they were talking about: possible links to cancer, aspartame, aloe vera, and some other things like that. So it sounds alarming, but in fact this really is based on the strength of the scientific evidence, and you have to look at that, and if it's possible that it might be linked to cancer, then you'd think that that evidence is weak. They're not clear at all that there is a risk. Now, there's another body that's linked to the United Nations which has tried to turn all that into real-world advice that we can use, and they've concluded that it would be perfectly acceptable for an adult weighing about 70 kilos to consume up to 14 cans of diet fizzy drink, and for a child to consume, a 10-year-old child weighs about 32 kilograms, that they would be able to consume 6.5, something like that. So most people will be well below the limit. Even if they are breaching that limit, it's still not definite that aspartame would be definitely causing cancer. So I think you can be reassured, unless you're consuming vast quantities of aspartame.
Thomas Moore there. Now, new figures suggest...
Now, it's interesting how he uses the double negative for may possibly. And, you know, he's using when he's talking about the WH research, is always in the you know, the possibly, the may cause, you know, probably unlikely, you know, that kind of terminology. And then when he says that, yeah, it's perfectly fine to drink 14 cans, it's you can. And when he talks about, as long as you don't drink huge amounts, and he gives that sort of chuckle joke, you know, when we're talking about cancer, one of the leading killers of it's a horrible disease. I fear it more than any other disease other than dementia and death per se, but cancer and dementia are the two most cruel disease, and we still haven't come to and including HIV, come to a, you know, figuring them out. But of course, we may have figured out, because we know that certain things do cause cancer, carcinogenics. We have a name for it, carcinogens. So I suspect we're in the early stages of, same with tobacco. In the future, it'll probably say, yes, this is definitely a cancer cause if you have those certain gene weaknesses, or you have a certain amount of it. But like he didn't actually point out that, yes, you can have 14 cans, as he said. But what he didn't say is that, wait a minute, that's maybe 4 cans plus 4 Muller yogurts plus 4, you know, strips of Wrigley's spearmint gum, plus if you're drinking any alcohol and cigarette smoking, well then you've made up the 100% of you, bang, you've hit it on the nail. You keep doing that long enough and then you will have possibly cancer. But I just thought, it's not, you know, if I suppose the thing is, at least it's on the news, and then it's up to you then, if you want to avoid having cancer, then that's one thing you can do. Cut out the aspartame and the red meat and the tobacco and alcohol, or at least limit them. But yeah, what interested me from it is the way the story was told, and we've got another bit that they put on later on. I'm just going to put that up now, when they talk to another research person, to sort of like, if you didn't feel that, you know, I don't know, it'd be interesting to know like how they all come about making their stories, you know, who is it actually picks it, is it the editor, is it, you know, whoever, you know, different news organisations that are private, who funds them and stuff like this. Why would they have investors interested in this or not? I don't know. I mean, you would have thought so, but then we know that lots of organisations, you know, when you look at these charts on YouTube, you know, that there's, you know, like 5 or 6 major organisations that, you know, control a lot of the media and a lot of all this stuff, and they're all intertwined with each other, and the banks and all that, and the lenders of money and finance people. But anyway, here's more, because if you didn't, you know, think that it was safe, here's another one to make sure you definitely think it's safe. It better not be, eh?
Well, let's return now to concerns around a sweetener commonly used in diet soft drinks, and a report from the World Health Organization has found a possible link between aspartame and liver cancer. But a panel of experts has said that the sugar substitute is safe in limited quantities. So let's unpack this a little bit, shall we? Here with me is registered dietitian and senior lecturer at Aston University Medical School, Dr. Dwayne.
No problem. But the problem is with the media, yeah? Sorry, I don't know you interrupted. Let's unpack this, which means let's brainwash you into what we want you to believe, you know, rather than being objective and looking at both sides of the story and being independent in any way. They didn't get the research people who did it at w.h.o. They got, and this is what they do a lot on the media, is they get someone from the universities. Here's a person who works in the university, and we're going to ask them these really important questions. No dissing to universities, but surely there's more qualified people research-wise and etc. At least the people who did the research should be there. But let's get this guy who works in a university.
and liver cancer. But a panel of experts has said that the sugar substitute is safe in limited quantities. So let's unpack this a little bit, shall we? Here with me is registered dietitian and senior lecturer at Aston University Medical School, Dr. Duane Meller. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us. So the WHO has ruled that aspartame, this sweetener used in thousands of products, is a possible cause of cancer. So how concerned should we be?
Well, if we look at what possible means, there's a number of things in our environment which are possible carcinogens. Aloe vera, there are some compounds that are found in coffee naturally which have been given the same label. And the WHO have actually said that coffee does not increase risk of cancer. There's actually evidence that it reduces it. So it's the difference between what's a hazard and what's a risk. So something may be a problem, and aspartame, we don't quite know the science behind how it could mechanistically through the biology cause cancer. We think it's through one of the compounds called methanol as it breaks down, but that also exists in food. We have the data, which is over 10 years old from animal studies, which is not 100% clear. So that's where the possible comes in. And the human data is unclear because there are big reviews of people reporting what they eat, linking to risk of cancer, but that's not clear-cut for the liver cancer in particular. It tends to be a bit hit and miss. So the overall conclusion from this is possible, which is lower than does or likely. The probable and possible, it's the lowest level, or one of the lower levels that it may. And in the amounts that the average person will consume, they're not going to get anywhere near the equivalent levels tested in animals, which is in the average adult, will be somewhere between 9 and 14 cans of diet soft drinks a day. The WHO
well, yes, that's right. Sorry, do go ahead.
I was going to say the WHO also did say that artificial sweeteners, including aspartame, are not to be widely recommended as a solution to help people lose weight. They can be a tool to help people reduce their sugar intake, which is part of a healthy diet, but not as a simple switch over from sugar to sweeteners to solve a health problem.
Well, yes, and I was interested when you were talking about the recommended limits of what people should consume of aspartame. And so we've got this warning, but at the same time, as you say, the recommended limit for the amount consumed is unchanged. So is that a confusing message to send out, do you think?
I think it's how we communicate it, because the possible gives people an alarm and there's a concern, which it shouldn't necessarily do. What we need to be clear on is this is to what we call an acceptable daily intake. And if we then quantify that in cans of drinks, but noting that you may add it to hot drinks as a sweetener, have it in things like medication and sort of products we use day to day, things like toothpaste and things like that, the average person will be consuming well below this. So the risk is low. And we also need to be better at communicating risk in life, because there's risk in many things that we do. Sort of walking across a road, daily activities come with some risk. And what they've classified this as being very low risk. And I think for too long we think that things don't have an effect on our bodies and our health, and they do, but they're often very, very tiny, as has been exemplified by this report we've seen today.
Yes, and the WHO's cancer research arm has said that there's limited evidence of a link to cancer. So you're surprised that they have put this out in the public domain?
I think because of the amount of media attention about aspartame, and we have lots of interest groups that some people say they have an effect of it. I was involved in studies when I was working, doing my PhD, where people said they had negative effects of aspartame, and we did a big study funded by the Food Standards Agency, and that showed that even if we gave them a dummy bar with no aspartame in, or a bar with aspartame in, it had no effect on how they perceive their symptoms or how their biology changed. So there's people that are concerned about this sweetener. There's also the food industry, which wants to have these products available because they give people choice. And I think it's important we have a...
Whoa. Let me just stop you there. That's a fucking lie, no? That gives you choice. No, they want to make money. That's why manufacturers make these things. And the Food Standards Agency, I suspect, they're funded by the food people, like all these other things where these agencies are actually funded, like the cigarette things, like all these companies that are funded by the actual people that they're meant to be, checking on. So, I don't know. Anyway.
Effect on how they perceive their symptoms or how their biology changed. So there's people that are concerned about this sweetener. There's also the food industry which wants to have these products available because they give people choice. And I think it's important we have a clear message, which this arm of the WHO have done. We just now need to be better at communicating. This suggests a maybe a hazard, but the risk, because of the uncertainty of evidence, is likely very, very low, and normal consumption is safe.
Okay, well, thanks so much for making that all so clear. Professor Kevin McConway, thanks very much indeed.
Well, he said it's safe. So I suppose in the future, if they ever find out it's not, we can all sue him, because he said it's safe. He didn't say it's probably safe, he said it's safe. He went out on a limb, 100% safe, on to take it in those small amounts. I do wonder, when they did the test on the animals, obviously, I don't know, did they do sort of like, if they gave this certain amount, then it would cause the cancer? Did they do the research that if they then reduced that, how did they find out the safety limit that the mice could have, say, half of that and it would be perfectly fine for them? And how many years did they test this on these mice? But the truth is, like he was saying, he did make some actually fair points. I mean, I know nothing about it. I'm just, to me, like, if it was my choice, I probably would avoid buying aspartame, anything with it in now, because, there is a possibility. And yes, even though it might, like they try to make out that crossing the road was probably got actually because most people get killed by cars or heart or cancer, maybe that's just as dangerous, crossing the road. But then I wouldn't cross the road blindfolded. So that's using your head, isn't it? The same as if I probably would limit, these things. I suppose that's what they were saying, wasn't it? So maybe I have no argument after all. I don't know. But it just, the reason why I wanted to point it, because I don't know it, whether, they've said that it may be, and it depends how much you take. Like, we all know that alcohol and red meat, and we're all taking that still. I suppose the thing is, like, if we actually cared about each other and human beings, because a lot of this is all to do with money and manufacturing and all that kind of competition, the whole, how the actual world really works. It's not really about safety. Yeah, we have these agencies who do this and has to be safe within a certain degree. But we can still sell you things, like red meat, which we know is in the probable, or tobacco, which is in the definite. And yet we can still sell all these things because it's your choice at the end of the day to take it and to take the risk that you take with that, because we've told you. I mean, it's written on the packets now of cigarettes. I don't know, but it falls into that sort of argument about the old system, new system. That's part of the old system where I suppose the thing is, like, we want freedom, isn't it? If you told everyone they can't have cigarettes or alcohol, well, we know what happened in the Prohibition. People will start selling it on the black market. We've opened that genie's bottle. We can't close it now. But it's just a shame that we're causing. I suppose what it really shows is the stupidity of our freedoms as human beings. Although that I believe in freedom, but in the sense that because we've been allowed these things, I suppose things at the time we didn't know these things caused all this stuff, but now we do know. What do we do about it? Do we just carry on and say, like, well, yeah, here's your warnings. Why, it's your fault you've got cancer now because you smoked all those cigarettes, because we told you, if that's the reason. I'm not trying to be, blunt or anything like that, but I mean, that's, I know that I like certain things that probably do, like red meat. I like beef. I shouldn't like animals at all, because animals are living beings. Why am I eating them? And I've often talked about this on The Pursuit of the Truth, and I do feel bad about it. How do we change ourselves? Because the thing is, like, that's why on The Pursuit of the Truth I talk about these. We need such drastic changes, and maybe that's why it's impossible to do. Drastic changes in our whole system, how we perceive each other as human beings, and the land that we found ourselves upon. That, getting rid of money, getting rid of borders, just start from scratch. Just like, we're human beings, we're all human beings. Let's help each other out. Let's not do things for making money. Let's stop making all this unnecessary duplications of things because we want the business, we want the money. Let's stop this, treating countries in different ways because we want this, to employ you people because it's cheaper and all that kind of stuff. Get rid of all those things. Get rid of all the food that's bad for us and start again, these kinds of seismic changes are so, well, like seismic, they're just so many that I guess that's why we're never going to get to it, is it? Unless, like w.h.o says, or it's often ascribed to him, or at least my dad told me he said it, about that if you want the only way that humans would evolve is after a major nuclear war, or a big bomb going off, and then start from scratch. But then with also Walking Dead and stuff like that, I don't know whether it would, because the ones left behind would still have that knowledge. Unless there were only certain people who want to start again, they'd all have that same knowledge of how things were. And let's get back to that, like we did during COVID. Let's get back to normal, even though we know normal was shit, and people are dying and starving, and all the stuff that I talk about. These things, all the stuff we see all around the world all the time, because of the way that we decided to live. Anyway, take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.